So we have four amazing panelists today who have volunteered to speak to us. Meg Gatza, if you want to introduce yourself first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Meg Gatza. I'm the Director of Operations at Bruner, Cott. We are a 30-person architecture firm, and we typically hire, on average, one intern every semester, and then a summer intern, as well as probably 2 to 3 people in a normal year.
Awesome. Thank you, Meg. And Scott Pollack.
Hi, I'm Scott Pollack. I'm a principal at Arrowstreet. I don't even know how big we are, 75, 80, 85, somewhere in that range. We're in downtown Boston in Post Office Square. We always do a summer internship program that we tend to try to structure around some research proposal. And we also have an environmental graphics group, and we hire at least one of those interns a year. We can be, anywhere between 6 and 20 new people a year, depending on the year. We are actually hiring right now, and are quite busy. So.
Awesome. Thank you. And Rosie Shen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rosie. I work in marketing for Flansburgh Architects. We're right in the North End. We're a 24-person firm, and we're actually hiring right now at all levels too. So, yeah.
Thank you. And Jessica Smith.
I'm Jess Smith. I work at Bergmeyer. We are 75 people. We are architecture, interior design, graphics, branding. We hire generally about the same as Arrowstreet, anywhere between 5 and 20 people a year, depending on how busy we are. This year it's 2. It's been 2 so far. Although we are also looking for people right now. It's just begun to pick up and get busier, which is excellent news.
Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. So we'll get into the questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much again to the panelists as well as the participants for joining us today. So we're really excited about this program because a lot of us kind of given us feedback on a lot of things, and we thought this was something that all of us could benefit from. So I'd like to start off the conversation by kind of asking each of our panelists about how COVID has affected your firm's hiring practices. I think this is something I'm sure all of us here are interested to hear more about, especially from those in your positions, essentially on the other side of the table, kind of dealing with the firm hiring processes and considering, given what's happened, because of COVID and so much uncertainty and the overall economy and the job market, and as well as a lot of social distancing and everything going virtual. We were just curious to know how all of these kind of affected, kind of once normal and simple things like making connections with candidates or job interviews. So that being said, I was hoping, Meg, if you don't mind being the first one to start us off.
Yeah, happy to. So we have conducted all of our interviews over Zoom. I have become an expert in speed interviews, especially doing like 5 to 10-minute interviews to connect very briefly with people to find out if they're a potential fit for us, or if or if they're not. And that's a really, to me, that's a little better than a phone conversation, because you can actually see a face-to-face conversation. And it's been fascinating to do that. I've hired 3 different interns that way, and an office coordinator. And it's been very successful as a stepping stone to having a longer conversation to find out more details about the company and about the candidates.
Thank you, Meg. And then I'll maybe hand over to Scott. And for other panelists, feel free to chime in. This is meant to be like a very informal conversation, so don't be shy.
So in some respects, it hasn't changed anything, because the same things that you're looking for in candidates in an in-person interview are the same things that you're looking for in a Zoom interview. So in some respects, we all got really used to being able to do this in person, but in many respects, it's sort of the same conversation. I think that, obviously COVID has had an impact on sort of the industry and other stuff. I've been doing this a long time. And this is my fifth major recession in my career in architecture. I see Jessica shaking her head. She knows what I mean. And so while it may seem shocking to people who are just coming into the profession, that's just sort of the nature of the economy. So in some respects, it hasn't changed anything. In other respects, I would say that the thing that has changed the most is what I would call the culture problem, meaning that the culture of firms is really important to both the having people really fit in and to be able to take the most advantage, and keeping the cultural life of our firms going is a struggle when we can't actually see yourself in person. So we've made a lot of effort, I think with some success, to figure out how do you actually let people know what that culture is, and most importantly, how do you get them to participate in the culture if they've actually never been in the office with other people. We probably have somewhere around 8 people that we've hired since the beginning of the pandemic last year when we went remote. And I'm glad to say that almost all of them have really felt welcomed into the firm. But the effort required, and I think the other part of that's really important, is the effort has to go both ways. You have to invite people into that, but people have to be willing to participate and make the effort. So it's, in some respects, it hasn't changed anything. It's just that we're doing them via Zoom versus face to face. But in other respects, helping people feel welcome, helping people feel valued, and helping people feel part of the organization is requiring much more effort on everybody's part, I think.
Do you have any people in your office, Scott? Any people going in at all?
So our office is open to anyone who wants to work in the office. No one is required to come in. On an average day, I'd say we have 8 to 12 people.
Yeah.
We have a few younger parents who felt like they really needed to be out of the office out of the house a few days a week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in 1 to 2 days a week. All of the partners are coming in a few days a week to create opportunities for people to connect with us if they want to. So the office is available as a resource. One other thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet. I'm tired, so I tend to blather, is, and I'm sure that this will come up in the conversation later, it has actually allowed people to stay with us who otherwise we might have lost. So we've had 2 fairly senior, late mid-career professionals who have, for various issues in their lives, not having anything to do with COVID. Donald's husband moved to Seattle for a new job. And because we've gotten so used to working remotely, we were able to say, well, if they're living in South Boston or they're living in Seattle, as long as they're willing to work the hours, be available at the same hours as everybody else is working. And so it has actually allowed us to think about ways to keep people integrated in the office who we might have lost a few years ago and maintain that talent. So, but the office is open and available to people, but on an average day, it's, 1 out of 8 or something like that. So what about you?
We're the same. We allow anybody who wants to go in the office to go. It's not a lot of people. On any given day, there are 5, maybe 10 people in the office. It's people escaping little shoebox apartments, people like me who really prefer the technology in the office. There's just so many more tools available to me there. But also I think we have, from a management point of view, I think it's also enabled people to work. Yes, we need some core hours where everybody agrees to participate in certain meetings, but also you know, if you're an early to bed, early to rise person and you want to get up and do your work between whatever 7 and 2, or you're a late night person, nobody knows anymore. Nobody can see anybody. And I think it solved a lot of that problem of, if I can't see them, I don't believe they're actually working, because people have had to make that leap of faith and just see the product. The product is what they see. Sometimes the person on Zoom, but mostly the work. And I think that it has allowed people to produce whenever they want to produce,
Yeah.
which has been good.
I think it's also really helped with family-friendly policies. You know, I agree with you. It allows people to make hours, and especially people who have small children and who are caretaking, who can then say, well, I'm going to have my core hours be between 10 and 2 when my partner can take care of the kids, and I'll make up the hours either early or late, and I'll get my job done. But I can also spend my time with my kids when I need to be helping them with school or any other activity. And again, I hope that means that the profession will be able to keep people real talent in the profession longer, better, by creating a much more sort of friendly environment for the variety of issues that people face in their lives, or desires that people face in their lives for how they want to live, but also be professionals. So
I think this forced us to start addressing some of the things that that Jess and I speak about a lot in our HR network meetings, where people working at firms that say, oh, no one can work from home because we don't trust that people are working. No, like, you have to work the hours that we say you work. And this has really just forced us to address those right up front and say, we're making do with what we can make do, and, you know, allowing people to use the office space if necessary, but providing resources wherever else we can.
I think it's opened up a lot more flexibility too in terms of hiring. If we want to hire people from different states or from, you know, abroad or anything, we actually had an employee who worked in a Boston office, and then her family's from Italy, so she moved to Italy. So there's that whole, you know, bit of flexibility that's been added.
we actually had one employee who went home to visit her family in Wuhan last February, and she's finally back in the States. But she worked from Wuhan for 8 months because she wasn't allowed to come home. And that worked out in the end just fine. She got her work done. She was clearly not working during open office hours. Most of the time, she made herself available for team calls and other sorts of stuff in the middle of the night. But I agree with you. I think it's opened up a whole level of flexibility that just didn't exist before. So
I am worried about the normal summer internships. We also have several internship programs that we usually fill. And I think that the value to summer interns generally is most felt in the office, not just the softball games and the picnics and all that stuff, but the really being able to see the different ways that everybody works. And if you're choosing an intern who can just does beautiful Revit drawings and is working for one person, then yes, they may get a nice salary and learn one project, but they're not going to get the same experience at all. And that I had hoped that by May of this year, we would be able to open up the office, but it's not happening as quickly as I hoped.
That's interesting, because we have had interns this whole time, and it's taken a very conscious effort to assign them to different projects to make sure that they're getting different levels of experience. That's been really important to us, you know, to make sure that if they've just finished working on CDs, that they're on SD on the next project, or you know, if they're actually in the Boston area, which our last two have been, that they have access to a job site, then go punch list and to do things like that, which has been really helpful. But it, you know, as somebody who's answered this question, I think 12 times today, people ask me what I'm looking for in an internship, or for an intern, and it's communication. You have to let a manager know that you're out of work to do, or that you want to try something different, because no manager can ever read your mind, no matter what you think.
Yep.
No one's a genius like that. So it's that is in this day and age, being able to demonstrate your ability to communicate is probably the key thing that I look for when I'm interviewing people.
yeah, and I'd like to extend that beyond just the interns, but to all the young professionals, that it was possible, and even in my day when I was an intern before most of you were born, that you could sort of be a little, you could be a sponge, you could be a little passive and soak up stuff because you were in the environment, listening to other people's conversations and seeing what's going on around you. I think that the thing that we spend the most time talking about and that worries me the most is how do we support young professionals in learning? And how do we create conscious opportunities for people to learn? And to completely agree with Meg, that also it becomes incumbent on the younger professionals to be more forthright and more active participants in saying, you know, I'd like to listen in on this. I'd like to participate in that, so that they learn those things. And we have to be open to allowing them to do those things and creating those opportunities. But it also requires, you know, we can't always be aware of that they're missing opportunities that it would be easy for us to get. So I agree with Meg, the ability for younger professionals, I don't want to use the word pushy, but it's almost the right word, to be a little pushy about saying, can I participate in that? I'm going to be out of work in 2 days. What else can I do? What else can I help with? Other opportunities available to me that would be helpful to the office, because those will be the things that will help me learn. And it's a two-way street. We have to be open to that and provide opportunities. But as Meg said, we can't read people's minds. So we don't know if you're interested, and we don't know when you're available to sort of do those things. So it's easier, you know, when I'm walking through the office and I can just drop by someone's desk and say, what are you doing? What are you going to be? It requires a whole other level of participation on both people's parts to do that, you know, via Teams calls.
Yeah, we like to call that self-advocating.
Yeah.
So I actually wanted to go back on one of the things you guys discussed about in terms of possibly like hiring people who are out of state, or even, you know, just because the way the whole virtual environment, one of the, I guess, the few advantages the virtual environment has given us is, you know, employing people that are not geographically so close. So for future hires, is that something that the office is definitely taking into consideration? And also, you know, hopefully by the time everything gets back to normal, has your office also thought about what happens to those hires that are not as, you know, close to the office?
Okay, I'll be the guinea pig. There are two answers to that question. I think it's very easy for us to imagine, as I've said, we now have 2 people who are living remotely from the office, but they were existing employees. And I think we've really reconsidered the future of, you know, you got people, they've worked with us for 4 or 5 years. We really like them. We had a young man who worked for us who moved to LA for personal reasons. You know, when he moved 3 years ago, I don't think it occurred to him, and I don't think it occurred to us that maybe, well, so what, he's moving to LA, who cares? He likes us, we like them. Why aren't we keeping that relationship? I think it's much harder when you're hiring somebody. And I think it also depends on what you're hiring them for. In the end, we are still architects, and in theory, we are still building buildings. And part of the process of learning how to build buildings and be a professional is going to job sites, as was just said, and doing punch lists and going to owners' meetings and seeing what construction is going on. You can't actually understand construction without actually being at the sites. And so it's harder to do that remotely, depending on obviously where your projects are. So it's a little harder to imagine hiring new people who aren't in the city and have no intentions of moving to the city when most of our work is in the city, and you want them to be able to participate in the full range of projects. I'll give an example. We have one younger professional in the office who, unbeknownst to us, had moved to Florida for the pandemic to be closer to his family. And we were going to give him an assignment because he'd been asking for more construction experience. And we were going to give him an assignment on a project where he was going to be able to do the drawings and then move straight into CA. And then we discovered that wasn't going to happen because he can't go to the job site because he's in Florida. So it's going to limit the options available for people. So it depends on what you are being hired to do. But in particular, from our perspective, in trying to give, it's a younger group, younger professionals a greater range of opportunities to learn about the profession and the world in which we operate. I think that hiring people who live remotely will limit the ability to really help train well-rounded professionals.
And I think on
I
the
would be-
flip side of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just concerned about that employee who didn't tell you he was moving to Florida.
Other issue. Let's not go into that. Rosie.
Sorry, Rosie, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think on the, I think that's definitely true. And then in addition to that, it's also opportunity to like branch into new territory too, and send proposals out to new sections of, places that we have, new employees. So I think there's like that other side as well.
I'll say I just spent today interviewing students at Howard University, which is an area that we would not have typically traveled to have students join us for internships for the summer. And the ability to offer a remote internship, yes, there's some difficulty with, the ability to like learn in an open environment setting and like everything we've discussed already, but the ability to offer a student the ability to join us without having to pay Boston rent is a really critical thing in terms of equity from our perspective. And I think, while Scott's point is well taken, it's a little lower stakes to try it out with interns for a little while first. Too. So I'm really interested to see how that pans out for us over the next, at least the next 2 semesters of interns.
It really is yes, the interns and the young emerging professionals all have to be assertive, but it's managers really need to be open-minded and communicative also. And the ones who aren't in pre-COVID times, the managers that aren't going to be good at it also. So
To say I agree with you, Meg, that it really depends on what role we're talking about. I completely agree with you. I think that, for people who you're talking about, either a 3-month or a 6-month, it's very different, and it's really easy to imagine doing that remotely, which I agree with you has major potential positive impacts on issues associated with equity. And I think it's something that we in the profession really have to be paying attention to create a broader range of opportunities for people. I was referring much more to people that we're hiring. We're going, well, we hope you're going to be with us for at least 3 years and maybe the rest of your career. It's a different issue, but I agree with you that I think it has created opportunities for the truly youngest of the professionals and people trying to come into the profession and learn about it. And I agree with you. I'm actually excited about those ideas.
Thank you, everyone. Another question one of our participants submitted, which I think kind of goes in hand with things we've been talking about, is with everything going on with the layoffs and the earlier last year, and still kind of uncertainty with the pandemic, how do you know that if you make a firm move or if you get a job that your new job will be secure?
I mean, my snark answer to that is, do you ever know that when you make that switch? Because you really don't. When you're always taking a risk when you move from one position to another. If you're already in a location, architecture is an up and down industry. I have only worked through 2 recessions, unlike Scott. But it's
Jealous.
but it is still, you see peaks and valleys even in non-recession times at different firms, and it is 100% a risk that when you're looking to make a move, you're going to have to accept. There's definitely the advantages to making a move too. So you know, I don't want to dissuade people if that's what you're interested in hearing, but you know, even in the best of times, you never know.
It also depends on why you're moving. I mean, it depends on the work that the firm does. How many different types of work are there? If you're moving because you don't want to do housing anymore and you want to do hospitality, or you want to do food, you know, academic work, look around. How many options? I mean, the pandemic really put several project types at risk for a while. And all of a sudden, everybody was getting jobs in residential because somehow the rich people just keep needing big houses to live in no matter what's going on, right? There are always people building big houses. A lot of the people we had to let go, 15 people in the late summer last year, all of them found work. Some of them we hired back, but everybody found work, and a lot of it was in residential. It was really interesting. But now we're hiring back again in retail and back again in academic, and it's, I'm sure people are nervous, but I think flexibility, if you're willing to be open to working in different project types, that's really important. But ultimately, it's going to come down to your attitude about what you're working on more than anything.
Yeah, I'd like to sort of say the same thing in a slightly different way that both have said. Yeah, one, there ain't no guarantees in life, especially in this profession, and it really is about why you're making the move. I would like to suggest to people that if you are making a move, either because you really don't like the environment that you're working in, and you're just professionally and personally unhappy, or you're making the move to learn something new, then what you're really doing is investing in your future. And there's always a risk associated with investment, but it's worth doing because what you're trying to do is make yourself a more well-rounded professional. Especially in your early stage of your career. If you're making the move just because of money, then that, in my mind, it's actually always a questionable move in my part, because the really way to make yourself valuable, which is the way you make the most money in the long run, is to actually be really good at your job and to be invaluable to your clients and to the other people that you work with. And so if you're making the move because what you're trying to do is learn more or be a better architect or learn a new set of skills or work with a new group of people who you think you can really learn from, yeah, it's risky, but it's probably actually still worth doing because it's going to make you a better professional, which is going to make it easier for you to find a new job. And it's not that I want my people to leave and move around and other stuff, but when I've been doing this a long time, and when someone says, well, I've taken this new job because it creates an opportunity that I think will make me a better long-term professional, just as someone in the profession, you go, how can I argue against that, right? I mean, it's good for the world that there are more skilled architects in the world. And so, yeah, there's going to be a risk involved, but if you're doing it for the right reason, it's probably worth taking the risk.
Thank you all for the answers. And then I'm going to ask one last question to the panelists, and then we're going to move on to the breakout sessions, where we'll be dividing into 2 different breakout rooms, 2 panelists per breakout room, and then think about 9 to 10 participants per breakout room, which will kind of give everyone an opportunity for more personal interaction and ask, questions that you're curious about. And again, those breakout room sessions won't be recorded, so ask any questions as you want. So for my last question, this maybe has to do with both our current circumstances, with all the remote and virtual world, as well as back in the past, or hopefully in the near future when everything goes back to normal. For a lot of emerging and young professionals like us, when we are looking for jobs, we don't have a lot of experience. And for some, one of the ways we can kind of make that up is through personality. You go to a job interview, and if it's a good fit in terms of culture, then we can kind of make that our kind of strong point. But with everything right now, again, with the virtual setting and all that, what does your firm look for in young designers and architects who are looking for jobs, especially if there's not a lot of experience that we can show.
I think one thing that Flansburgh looks for is just kind of like what Meg was saying, just being a good communicator, and then also just being curious too. Taking, if you have a question, like asking it, or just going after it. I don't know.
I would say a certain boldness. Yeah, the ability to speak up, especially. I mean, it's more important now than ever if you're just on a screen, but in an in-person interview, I want, I want you to ask all the questions that you think are stupid. I want you to ask, I want to feel a little bit of your personality, and understand what makes you tick, not just how good your personality is.
I think all of it's still relevant now. If your personality, well, I guess I'll start by saying that if we're hiring people with less experience, there's a reason we're hiring people with less experience. That's the level that we're trying to hire. So, you should shine through with the level of experience that you have. If I'm looking for someone with 1 to 3 years of experience, I'm not gonna be looking for somebody with 6 years of experience who's out of work. That's a different level of architect or designer than what I'd be hiring for. So I think it's the same. Your personality comes across through the screen too. It's easier for some people than others, but it's still really an important part of who you are and what you can bring to a company, because hopefully someday you'll be talking to clients, and that's important.
I agree with everything that's been said. I would add 2 other points. One is, just because you're young, just because you may not have a lot of experience, doesn't mean that you can't talk about design in a compelling way. And I would rather hear at all levels, but in particular when I'm interviewing younger people, I don't care if it's you only had the opportunity to really think about a single detail. Tell me why that single detail was interesting. Tell me what you learned in developing that detail, and be able to express the design concepts behind it in compelling and interesting ways. Because if you can do that at the beginning of your career, it's going to show that you're curious. It's going to show that you're able to communicate. It's going to show your personality. Really, I mean, in the end, we have to communicate design. And show me that you can communicate about design. And it doesn't have to be big, grand ideas, because we don't all get to do big, grand ideas every day. It can be a very limited sort of subject, but that's what I want to hear. I want to hear someone who can show me that they're curious and can really express the design considerations of the design concept they were working on. And it really doesn't matter to me whether it was a stair or a bathroom or a piece of curtain wall, or it doesn't have to be this big, beautiful thing. And then the other part that I would say is, and this is actually harder to tell remotely, people sometimes feel like they need to pretend they know more than they do. And it's particularly difficult to avoid doing when you're just starting out. It's a mistake. It's a mistake every time. Even if you can convince someone that you're more experienced than you are, as soon as you start working, it's going to come through. Show us that you're curious and smart and willing to learn and interested, and are able to absorb new ideas and be good at those things. And that's enough. You don't have to claim experience that you don't have. That's not what's important. Our job is to give you that experience and to learn from it. Prove to us that you're going to do something with that experience when we give it to you. That's much more valuable to me. I don't need to know that you've worked on 15 big projects. I want to know that you're going to be good when you work on my projects.
I would say something very politically incorrect, which is men are much worse at that than women. Women are far more willing to say, wow, I've never done that before. Can somebody teach me how to do it? So men, learn something from this. Practice saying it. I've never done that before. Can someone show me how to do that? It goes a long way. And then another thing, those of you who've been to the BSA meeting have heard me say this little mantra before, but you get hired based on your resume, your portfolio, and your interview charisma. You get promoted based on your courtesy and your enthusiasm. You get fired because of your people skills. So you need all of those things, but in the end, once you get your foot in the door and you're working and you've found people who you can work with and learn things from, pay attention to your people skills.
Thank you for that amazing amazing comment, Jessica. So with that, I think it's a great time for us to go into separate breakout rooms. The participants have been randomly assigned. The breakout number 1 will be hosted by Scott and Rosie, and then the other room will be by Meg and Jessica. So I've set up a time for 25 minutes. So feel free to use this time to ask any questions you have in mind. And then the plan is to come back into one room and after 25 minutes and just have a closing session for everyone. So thank you again for joining us. And then we'll see you guys in respective breakout rooms.